Iceland, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jeannie and you are in the right place if you're planning a trip to Iceland, because every single week I put out a new video to help you plan the best trip ever. Today I want to talk about how cold is Iceland. Let's bust this myth once and for all, because on one hand you have people that say Iceland is not cold, and on another hand you say Iceland is so cold, it's crazy. So in my experience living in Iceland since 2015, I'm confident that I can report on the truth. So today I'm going to talk about two huge reasons why I believe that Iceland is colder than you think. But before we get into all of that good stuff, it's time for a little Instagram gratitude. This week's message comes from Trisha, and she writes, "Hi Jeannie, my husband and I are visiting Iceland next weekend. Your videos have been so helpful. All of your tips on packing, culture, and what to expect have helped us so much. Thank you for all of these fabulous videos." Thanks so much to Trisha for her message, and if you would like to be featured in a future video, then all you have to do is slide into my DMs and leave a comment. I absolutely love connecting with you guys on Instagram. It's such a fun way for me to keep up with your trip and help you along your planning journey. All right, so now it's time to dig into why Iceland is colder than you think it is. Let's get into it. So the first reason is the wind. Lord help us all. The Icelandic wind is something of its own monster. It's hard to put into words, and it's really hard to explain unless you've actually experienced it yourself. Iceland takes wind to a whole nother level. It's basically unlike anything you've ever experienced, unless you've experienced standing in the middle of a hurricane. And what's interesting is it's not these dramatically windy days that can be cold. It's the fact that the wind is almost always present. If there's no wind in a day, it feels weird. That's a rare thing, and it's definitely noticeable. On those days, we're usually like, so nice out today. Even if it's just hovering above freezing. If the wind isn't there, we're gonna be okay. And then you have the wind storms. These storms are, I'm not exaggerating, hurricane force winds. The wind just sweeps across the landscape and just hits you right in the face. And FYI, when these windstorms come, good luck sleeping. Because a lot of times it honestly feels like the building is gonna blow over, or like the windows are gonna blow out. It gets so windy. It's hard to explain. But I always sleep really bad on those nights because it just is so loud. So loud. Pro tip, the wind in Iceland is measured in meters per second, which is a really interesting thing to try and wrap your brain around if you're used to measuring wind in miles per hour, like my American friends. And just for reference, an average wind speed on any given day in Iceland is between 5 to 10 meters per second, which converts to 10 to 20 miles per hour. And a high wind speed is anywhere around 25 to even 35 meters per second, which is 55 to 75 miles per hour. It's not fun, trust me. For reference, a Category 1 hurricane is between 75 to 95 miles per hour. We've definitely seen those wind speeds here. And on these crazy, crazy windy days, it just feels like you're gonna blow over just standing there. There's also been times where I feel like my car is shaking or just sitting in a parking lot. This makes opening and closing doors on vehicles extremely dangerous because the door could fly off. Not joking. If you have any papers that you don't want to blow away forever, don't expose them to Icelandic wind. I could go on and on. But really the thing is, it's just the craziest thing that you'll experience. Even flashing back to when my parents came to visit us in Iceland, we took them for a day out on the Snæfellsnes Peninsula, and it was really, really windy that day. And my dad is an outdoorsman, and he goes hunting in North Dakota. And if any of you know what that means, it's basically a very windy state because it's extremely flat. So he thought that he was okay with wind. And he had never experienced anything like this before. It was just blowing his mind. Literally, pun intended. Oh, God, I crack myself up. Anyway, the moral of the story is, it doesn't matter what the temperature is. If there's wind, which there almost always is, it's gonna feel colder than it actually is, right? So a lot of times people will look at the temperature that, oh, I'm coming to Iceland in June and it says it's only gonna be X degrees. Add the wind on top of that, and it's cold. Much less if you're coming in the winter and it's X temperature, add the wind on top of that because it's gonna make it feel a lot colder than it is, okay? So I'm wondering, for any of you that have visited Iceland before, have you experienced these crazy Icelandic winds? Let me know in the comments below and leave your story of your experience with the wind, because I could sit here all day and talk about the wind. It's just crazy. The second reason that Iceland is colder than it seems is the humidity. And to illustrate this point, I'm going to use a comparison for two major cities in the US. So bear with me if you've never been to these places. So the cities are Houston and Phoenix. Both very, very hot cities in the US, two very different levels of humidity. Phoenix is extremely hot, like temperatures in the 100 degrees Fahrenheit, hot, 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 but it feels like you just opened the door to your oven, right? You get that blast of heat and it's like, oh my God, what is happening? That's hot, right? On the other hand, if you go to Houston, Texas, which I know because I've lived there, they have a really high humidity. So their temperatures are also high, not quite as high as in the hundreds, but they have high humidity percentage. For example, when I would walk out my front door to my car in the parking lot, I would already be dripping with sweat. That's how crazy the humidity is in Houston. So with a higher humidity, in my mind, it always feels hotter. And so with that, even though the temperatures are both high and both crazy, and you know, in Houston, it always feels hotter because the humidity is so high. As a comparison, Iceland is an island, right? I mean, we know this. And because it's surrounded by water, there's a lot of humidity in Iceland. On average, between 65 to 85% humidity at any given day. For example, today is 83% humidity and it's February. So even though the temperature is right around freezing today, it feels a lot colder because of the humidity. Also, right, let's tie in point one. If you have X temperature, but it's humid and it's windy, good luck. So the humidity is kind of like the chills you to the bone feeling, right? It feels cold. You just can't escape it. It's the kind of cold that you just want to go inside, drink a warm cup of tea, and sit by a fire and warm up. And you guys, this is exactly why it's so important to take my advice and pack the right gear for your trip. No matter what season you're coming, it doesn't matter if you're coming in summer or winter or any time in between, having the right gear is super important for just being happy on your trip. If you don't have the right gear, you're gonna be cold or wet, or the wind is gonna cut right through you. So don't make that mistake. To help you out, I have created an entire Amazon storefront which lists all of the gear that I recommend for your trip. So all you have to do is click on the link in the description below. It will take you to that page and you can see everything that I recommend, including the right outerwear, the warmest gear, all of the things so that you can enjoy your trip and not have to worry that the wind is high or that it's humid, because you're gonna be prepared. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me on today's video. I hope you learned something. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed so that you don't miss any of future videos coming up. And I'll see you next week for another Iceland planning video. Happy planning, friends.